Hey guys, thanks for joining us for this week's PB&J podcast, where myself and my sister Michelle will join you guys each week to talk about true crime cases and paranormal cases and pretty much anything else we feel like talking about. So buckle up and stay tuned each week for a new podcast. We hope you will enjoy it, and be sure to like, share, and subscribe where you can. And if you feel like donating to us, you can do so at buymeacoffee.com/PBANDJ. Thanks for listening.
Hey y'all.
Hey guys.
So before we get started today, I just wanted to remind you guys that we do have a YouTube channel and we would like to increase our listenership on that. So if you'd head over there, I believe there is a link on the Anchor website to our YouTube channel. If not, it's PBNJ7174 and the and is spelled out. So check us out on YouTube, subscribe. It'll let you know as soon as we upload a new video. And right now it is a video of our podcast. It's not us. It's just pictures of whatever that topic is that week. We will, at some point later down the road when we are comfortable, we will start filming our podcast.
Yes.
So that you guys can see us film the whole process. So,
I'm excited about that too. I'm ready for that.
So yeah, head on over to YouTube and check us out over there. Please subscribe to our channel. We would really appreciate your support over there on that platform. And so today we're going to talk about the very, very popular and I would dare say well-known story.
Yeah, a bit controversial too. So
because I remember it when I was little.
Yes.
People talking about it.
There's been books, there's been movies, there's been
all kinds
a lot of exchange about it. So
let's get into it. Let's talk about the Amityville case.
Yes. And we're going to do both aspects of it. We're going to do what started it and how it ended. On November 13th, 1974, about 30 miles outside of New York City in a Long Island town of Amityville, there's a house that was the scene of a mass murder. Using a .35 Marlin rifle, 23-year-old Ronald DeFeo Jr. murdered his entire family, which included his mom, dad, and 2 brothers and 2 sisters, while they slept. About 13 months after the murders, a young family, a newly married couple with 3 children, purchased the home for the drastically reduced price of $80,000. Now we're talking about a community that was very upscale, very high priced. $80,000 for this home was a steal. Even back in 74, that was a steal because this was a, what you'd call, I guess, a bedroom community, very quiet, very, safe streets. You could leave your doors unlocked at night. Nobody ever had any issues.
Like the houses had boat houses.
Yes. Yeah.
That kind of neighborhood.
Yeah. Nobody over there. It was on the canal. So everybody pretty much that lived in that area had a boat, had a place for their boat. They purchased the home, fell in love with it at first sight. After putting a bid in on the home, they were told what happened. George Lutz has been known to have said that him and the kids and his wife sat down and talked about what happened there, discussed what happened. And they all decided as a family that it would not bother them to live there.
Which I cannot say I would feel the same.
No, what was always odd to me, and it's a very little known fact, and I did not know this until I watched a documentary recently, is not only did they purchase the house, they purchased some of their belongings that were left.
Yeah. As far as I No, like they were sleeping in the beds.
Yes.
That were left, and I'm guessing new mattresses.
New mattresses,
obviously,
but the bed
but
frames
the
and
bed
stuff like
frames and
that.
all
Yeah.
stuff. And that's where this family was murdered, in their beds.
Yes, in their beds.
So
Yeah.
I can't.
Yeah.
I mean, the house is one thing, but the belongings, I don't think I would.
No. And the controversy behind this is a lot of people believe that the reason why the Lutzes told their story is because they were living beyond their means and could not afford the house, which was not true. George was a business owner. He owned his own business. His business did not start to fail until they moved into the house. And it was basically because of the things that he did. It was, he had kind of lost touch with reality in the 28 days that they were there, and had a lot of issues between the family and stuff that went on. But even people that worked for him said he always paid his bills. They never had a problem with him with getting paid, things like that. Some of the claims or the facts that were claimed by the Lutz family were, I guess, unless you were living there, you didn't quite understand the stuff that they went through. So,
Right.
Ronald DeFeo himself said that the house had a vibe about it when they first moved in. Supposedly before the DeFeo family moved in, they were a loving family, big family. Always, they worked with each other. They cared for each other, never had any problems. But when they moved into the house, he claims that things kind of went south, that, they were always arguing. Their father became a tyrant, things like that. He claims that he had heard voices leading up to the murders, things like that. Now, as far as the murders go, one of the issues that was brought up during the murders was there was a possibility that Ronald DeFeo Jr. did not commit all of the murders. That
Right.
he shot the mother and father, but his sister Dawn shot the three siblings, and he flipped out. That's why he killed her, because she wasn't supposed to kill the kids. Now, one of the things that's odd to me is, if anybody knows anything about this and they've seen pictures of the houses and stuff, the houses were fairly close together. Not,
When I was doing my own research on it, I did not realize how close this house was to its next door neighbor.
Yes, both next door neighbors, because on the other side, they're pretty close to him too. The rifle that he used was a high-powered 35 caliber Marlin rifle, which echoes. You would have heard this. There was no silencer found on the gun. There was no silencer found with the gun.
Evidence of a silencer being used either. The
only thing people recall hearing that night is the dog barking.
Right. So if they heard the dog barking, why didn't they hear?
They hear the gun?
Because this gun, I'm told, can be heard for up to a mile away.
Yes.
From where it's being discharged at. So.
Nobody heard, and you're talking.
If you haven't heard about Anchor, it's the easiest way to make a podcast. Let me tell you why. It's free. There are creation tools that allow you to record and edit your podcast right from your phone or computer. Anchor will distribute your podcast for you so it can be heard on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, and many more. And you can make money from your podcast with no minimum listenership. It's everything you need to make a podcast in one place. Download the free Anchor app or go to anchor.fm to get started. That's anchor.fm to get started today.
Okay, so you're talking about 6 people shot.
With 8 shots being fired, because Mom and Dad were both shot twice.
Yes. And nobody heard anything. Nobody heard the gun go off.
To me, that's absolutely ridiculous.
It's
that nobody could hear that.
Yeah, and people, world-renowned psychic and paranormal investigators have said that when something like that happens, you can create what's called a psychic bubble, where you can't hear anything outside of that bubble.
Right.
So it kind of just narrows it into that one spot, and nobody beyond that can hear anything. So all of them.
Honestly, let's kind of delve into that just
Yeah.
a tiny bit.
Yeah.
Because if you, like, Tulsa is very famous for its, what's that place where you can go?
The center of the earth.
Center of the earth.
Yes.
In Tulsa.
Yes.
And you can go to that place, and it's very weird.
Yes.
Like,
you can't hear anything outside that area.
And it's a very small area.
It
Look
is.
that
Yeah.
up and you'll see what we're talking
Yeah.
about. But
it's not enclosed. It's out in the open. It's out in the.
It's in the middle
in elements.
Of the
Yeah.
street.
Yeah.
Not in the middle of the street, but in the middle of the sidewalk.
Yeah.
And you can't hear outside of it, and it echoes in that little area.
Yeah.
It's not enclosed. It's not. It's very much out in the open. It's like you're walking down the street. All of a sudden, you're in the center of the earth, and you can't hear anything.
Yeah.
So, and if you look at like vortexes and things like that, there are studies that show, like, there's a whole thing such as vortexes that means, like, you can't hear outside of them. So the fact that they could hear the dog but not hear the rifles shot 6 times or 8 times, is crazy. I mean, it's absolutely crazy. You have to know there's something else going on, even if it's something as simple as just a small vortex.
Yes. Yeah.
That house is in.
And police officers, like, these were detectives, found it very odd that nobody heard the gunshots.
Right.
So these
are hear the dog.
But to hear the dog,
and it wasn't the next door neighbor that heard the dog.
No, it was down the street.
Down the street.
Yeah.
That heard the dog.
Yeah.
So, and I mean, obviously the dog was outside. So if the house is in a vortex, but the property's not, that would make sense that they could hear the dog and not hear the gunshots. Yeah. So it's just one of those things that's very odd to me about this case.
Yeah. The other thing that was odd is that I want to say the majority of them, I don't know if the dad, for some reason, I don't think the dad was in the same position, but the mom and all the kids were on their stomach, were sleeping on their stomach.
Dad was on his stomach.
Was he on the stomach too? Yeah. Okay. And they found that really odd that all members of the family were in the same position.
And there's no evidence of, like, anybody getting up to say what's going on.
No struggle,
no struggles, no nothing. Like, especially, like, if mom and dad, obviously they're sleeping in the same bed.
Yes.
For one of them to be shot twice and the other one not to hear that or not to wake up.
Yes.
And there's no evidence of any type of sleep aid or anything like that.
No, they found no drugs in their system. And I think, if I remember correctly, I think the mom was the one that was shot twice because she turned over after he shot her first, which could have been a reflex because of where he shot her.
Right.
They were all shot in the same vicinity in their back.
Right.
And I think she turned over and he shot her again.
Except for the girls. The girls weren't shot in the back.
No.
But Dad was shot twice too.
Dad, okay. So maybe I could have that wrong.
Mom and Dad were shot twice.
Yeah. But you're talking about a succession. I mean, not a succession. Actually, the first 2 shots would have woken the kids up. They were just above them. So, but nobody woke up. Apparently, DeFeo says that his sister came out of the room and wanted to know what was going on. And he told her to go back to bed.
Right.
And then he shot her.
His oldest sister.
The oldest sister.
Dawn.
So there's a little bit, in some of his stories, he says that Dawn helped him do this. In other stories, she didn't. So there's.
And then there's also a story of she did all of it.
Yeah.
Except for herself.
And he came home and found it. And that's when he flipped out and killed her.
Right.
So it just depends on, I guess, the day of the week that he was telling the story. So.
Because there's also. I was watching something yesterday about this, and someone said that there was evidence that Dawn was the one that disposed of the gun.
Yes.
But how can that be true if she was shot with the same gun?
Yeah, because they were all shot with the same gun.
So that doesn't make sense to me.
But they also said that there was evidence that there was another gun in the house or something like that. I don't know what
Right.
that was about, but that's so. Fast forward to when the Lutz family moved in. There was evidence, and there was they had talked about it. George and Kathy Lutz had talked about it, and the one son that actually has talked to people. He did a documentary. Danny, who was the oldest, has said that George was into things like the black arts, transcendental meditation, things like that. He had a lot of books on those properties. And now, growing up, we grew up in church, and a lot of the things that we learn in church is that when you open yourself up to things like that, things happen. So even owning like things like books, movies, Ouija boards, things like that can open you up to the, occult type activity, those darker forces. I mean, we grew up with a pastor that said watching movies like that can open up things to a darker purpose. Things that they knew, there were certain things about when they lived there that were odd. One was George was said to wake up at 3:15 a.m. every morning from the moment they moved in, every morning. And that was the time that the murders were carried out, was at 3:15 in the morning. Kathy had very vivid dreams where she was basically able to tell people the order that they were murdered, which nobody knew because nobody knew that. And certain things about the murders that were not made public, but she knew these things. So when you, nowadays there are some places where when you buy a house, they have to tell you everything that's happened in the house. I don't think this was a situation there. He just told them because he felt bad because he had young children.
I don't think
the realtor felt now you have to disclose that. Yeah. Now in some places, there are some places where there's no disclosure law, so you don't have to tell them. But he felt bad, so he told them what happened. But even he didn't know the order that they were murdered and certain things that the Lutzes knew.
Right.
So
this was, let's see, they moved in November of 75 or December of 75?
December of 75.
So
it was a little over a year after.
Right. But it was before DeFeo Jr. was before his trial.
He hadn't even gone on trial yet. He was just in prison.
Jail,
yeah.
In custody, but he had not gone on trial yet.
Yeah.
So a lot of those things wouldn't have been made public.
No.
At that time.
Because nobody would have, they couldn't disclose that.
Because his trial was still pending when they moved in. And they moved in and moved out all before his trial ever got started.
Yes, because they talked to his lawyer prior to the trial even starting.
Right. Can I say, let me just share this about his lawyer. In my opinion, and this is just my opinion, so don't come for me, but his lawyer was a complete scumbag.
Sleazy.
Very.
Ambulance chaser.
And gross.
Yeah.
Like, I cannot even.
He took
his lawyer.
I can guarantee you beyond a shadow of a doubt, after watching some of the interviews that he done, he took this case in the hopes of getting rich.
Yeah.
Guaranteed. And when the Lutzes decided that they didn't want to deal with him, that's when he came out and said they were lying.
Right.
And even one of the reporters that spoke with the Lutzes after they talked to the lawyer, she said that they were very upfront and very honest. They told him that there were some things they had recorded their sessions with his lawyer, said that there were things on the tapes that they weren't proud of, things that they said that they weren't proud of.
Right.
Now, understand that the movie that they made, whenever you have a story like this, Hollywood takes what they call poetic licensing,
right,
where they have to make it where you want to see the movie.
Sure.
So
theatrical. It has to be theatrical.
It has to be theatrical. So things that have happened when Hollywood takes over become larger than life. So when you see people that have they've done a true story on, some of the people will say that's not exactly how it happened, but this is even Lorraine Warren, who they're doing all the Conjuring movies, said that they've taken basically poetic licensing where they've kind of embellished. Yes, these things happen. It may not have happened exactly like that, but they're on the right track. So even the Lutzes will tell you that a lot of the stuff that they did was not technically what happened, but it was embellished, but not on their part. They just wanted the story. Some of the things that the Lutzes claimed happened in the house that the police tried to shoo away, which I have a very problem with, was that they claimed that there was slime on the walls that was green. Well, the police said, well, that's the luminol that they spray and it glows.
Yeah.
And they said that the reason why it was still on there was because they had never cleaned things up. I find that hard to believe. Kathy Lutz was a very clean person. So I imagine when she moved into the house, just in my opinion, I know I would have cleaned the house from top to bottom.
Right.
A year later, there should not be luminol still on the walls.
Well, and the attorney, DeFeo's attorney, said that it was from fingerprint powder.
I don't believe that.
So, I mean, there's different stories as to what it is.
Yeah.
And what it's from.
Yeah.
And the interview that George Lutz gave, it was, there would be slime here and there. It wasn't like in the movie where there's blood running down the walls. That's not how it was.
Yeah.
But, there you have the movie version versus what someone else said versus what someone else said versus what someone else said.
Right.
So
by the time it's like that old game telephone where you whisper something in somebody's ear. By the time it gets around to the other side of the circle, it was a completely different story. So there were they said that they experienced cold spots in the house. They experienced flies in one particular room, which the police department kind of said, well, yeah, there were flies because people were murdered in the house. These people were found barely 24 hours after they were murdered.
Right.
In the middle of winter. A year later, there's not going to be a swarm of flies in that house. These people have already been living in the house. Any evidence of the murder, they would have already scrubbed clean because she's going to clean the house. I mean, that's just to me. So if you have a large colony or swarm of flies in the middle of winter, there's something going on. And they weren't the only ones that saw them. There were other people that saw the fact that this one particular room had tons of flies in them. So I have a little bit of an issue with people kind of making excuses and shooing away. One thing that was kind of explained in one of the documentaries that I read, which did make sense to me, is the finding of a room, what they called a secret room, that was in the basement that was painted red. Kathy and George always thought that was a little weird. Now, one of the neighbor kids said that he was there when that room was found, when the DeFeos found it, and they decided that they were just going to keep extra toys and stuff like that in it because the kids played in the basement. Apparently, in the basement they had like a room set up. There was a TV. There was stuff like that. And I think DeFeo Jr. lived in the basement. He had a room down there. The neighbor kid said that the reason why the room was painted red is because that's the only paint they had. So they just painted it red. It needed to be painted. So they painted it red. So that it wasn't a spooky room or
I want to say that it wasn't even, was it the DeFeos that painted it? I thought it was the Lutzes that painted it.
The neighbor kid said
paint because George had extra paint around. And
the story that I heard, the DeFeos were the ones that painted it because the neighbor kid was friends with the younger DeFeos and he was there the day they did it. The kids painted it. There had been a priest that came into the house who was not a Catholic priest. He was a regular priest. Now in the movie they show him to be a Catholic priest. In the in real life, he was another priest. I can't remember what denomination he was, because George was not Catholic. I think Kathy was, but George wasn't. But a priest that had handled some other stuff for him came in, said he would have no problem coming in and blessing the house. And he went from room to room, and said when he went into this, what they called the sewing room, is when he felt he got a cold chill. There were tons of flies in there, and he heard a voice telling him to get out of the house. He never told them that, I think, to begin with. He just wanted to know what they were going to use that room for. And she said, probably a sewing room. And he said, as long as nobody sleeps in that room, they should be fine.
That's what
So, there were other things that happened in the house that, if you were standing on the outside looking in, yeah, you would probably think that's the weirdest thing I've ever heard. And how could you, they got to be lying. But this, had I not heard some of these things reiterated by Danny Lutz in a later, and let me back up a little bit. Danny Lutz hated George. He was not a fan of his. They did not get along when he was growing up. George actually adopted the kids and gave them his last name, because what was said was he would not marry her unless he could adopt the kids. And Danny's father gave up his rights. He resented George for that. He's come out and said he's resented him for that. He's made comments that he's glad he's dead. So there was no love lost between these two. This man had every reason. He could have come out and said he lied. The whole thing was a lie. It never happened that way. Nothing ever happened. He didn't. He came out and did a interview with Laura DeFeo, who was she was one of the people who had originally talked to the Lutz family after this all happened, as an adult, and kind of backed up pretty much everything that happened.
Yeah.
And you're talking about somebody that could have come out and said, he was a lying ass, and nothing this happened. He just did it to make money, but he didn't. He kind of backed the story up. His mother was already deceased. He had nothing to lose.
Right.
So
Exactly.
he could have come out and said, no, they lied about this. And he didn't. He is the only one of the 3 children that has done an interview. So that's, that says a lot to me. George and Kathy both, after telling their stories, they took a lie detector test and they passed.
Right.
Both of them, like, super pass. So, they think that the reason they did have some financial problems, they weren't destitute and desperate like people put them out to be. So when they found out that they had financial problems, people thought, oh, well, they're just making this up to make some money. They didn't make that much money off this.
Right.
Jay Anson, who I believe wrote the book, and I can't remember who did the movie, but the person that did the movie, they made more money off this than Lutz's did. DeFeo Jr. did not profit at all.
Right.
And neither did his lawyer.
Did his lawyer not profit?
I don't think his lawyer profited off of it. I think and that's why he was pissed, because he had a book deal in the works. When he signed DeFeo Jr. to do he already had a book deal in the works.
Crazy. And
that's why you're never going to convince me that he didn't take the case thinking he was going to get mad rich off this. He claimed, the lawyer, William Weber, claimed that him and the Lutzes concocted this story,
right,
for financial gain, and that none of this was true. Daniel, the son of the Lutzes, claims the house ruined his life, and to this day he continues to have nightmares about what happened in the house.
Right.
The murderer, Ronald DeFeo, has changed his story several times,
right,
basically to suit his needs. The house still stands. The former owners have made changes to it in hopes to quell people showing up in the middle of the night.
The address has been changed.
The address has been changed. It's not the same address.
It is not 112
No.
Ocean Avenue anymore.
Um,
The windows that are so popular have been changed. They don't
Yep.
look like that anymore. There are still windows there.
Yep.
They don't look like the eyes.
of the house. The house sold in February of 2017 to an undisclosed owner for $605,000, which was $200,000 less than what the original asking price was for the house.
At one point, this house was on the market for over $1 million.
Yes.
I don't think it ever sold for that amount.
No.
But it seems like everybody that has owned it and sold it has taken a loss at some juncture.
Now, the previous owners of the house after the Lutzes have claimed that they never felt anything in the house.
Right. No owner since the Lutzes has ever come out and said they experienced anything in the house, which I will say I don't necessarily fully believe. And the only reason I don't really believe that no one else has experienced anything is because, put this together, there were 6 people that lost their lives in a very fast, very brutal, violent way. That has to have left some type of mark on that house. You will never convince me that those deaths did not leave some type of mark on that house. I don't believe the house is haunted. Myself, my personal opinion, I don't believe the house is haunted. I don't believe there are necessarily entities in the house that are waiting to just come after anybody.
Yeah.
Because I do think if that were the case, other people would have come forward and said something. But
Yes.
I do think that there are things that go bump in the night that they are just attributing to it being an older home. This house was built way, way back. It's very much an older home.
Yep. The house was originally not there. That house was actually moved from another area and put on that property. So that property had an old farmhouse, I think, on it. So I've read that somewhere or heard it in one of the things that it was not originally on that property. It was moved from somewhere else. So
I think what is happening in the house is just being chalked up to it's an older home.
Yeah.
It's creaking and moaning and all that stuff. But I think there is a mark on that house.
Yeah.
It's not possible for there not to be in my mind.
No.
Because 6 people lost their lives in violent ways.
Yes.
In very quick, violent ways. When that happens, a lot of the times those spirits don't realize that they're not alive anymore.
No.
And you're talking about children. I mean, one of the boys was 9, one was 12. I want to say the youngest girl was 13, and the oldest girl was 18. I mean, these are young folks. They weren't older people.
No.
And even Ronnie Sr. and Louise, I believe is her name, Louise DeFeo. The mom and dad weren't old.
No, they
were in their early 40s.
Yeah, they were a younger couple.
So, these people, it's possible that they never realized that they were not alive anymore.
Yeah.
So those spirits would have been in the house, and I don't believe they would have been necessarily hateful spirits or anything like that. But I do think there are things that happen in that house that are being attributed to the fact that it's an older home.
Yeah.
And not being correctly attributed to the fact that 6 people lost their lives in that home.
Yeah. And my thing is that if you don't believe in this, you don't believe in it.
Right.
And you're going to find an excuse for everything.
Sure.
And the fact that the Lutzes, George and Kathy, believed in this and probably went in there with we don't, it's not a big deal. We're not superstitious. It doesn't. but that he was involved in things like this I believe, made them more susceptible to a haunting
And
than it would if you didn't believe in this.
And I think this is something that not a lot of people realize, but they didn't just have problems in that home.
No.
They had problems after they left that home too.
Yes.
So I believe they had something going on that was attached to them.
Yeah.
Not necessarily attached to the home.
Right.
And of course, you put them in put people in an environment where they have something already attached to them.
Right.
You put them in that environment where 6 people have lost their lives in a traumatic way. You put those things together and you have Amityville Horror Story.
I mean, you have the perfect storm, because to me, when you open yourself up to stuff, something's going to happen. I mean, this is all the way. If you moved into a house that you knew somebody died in, first off, whether anything's going on or not, your mind is going to make you believe something's going on, because every creak, every groan, every floorboard that squeaks, you're going to think, oh my God. Can you imagine sleeping in a house where 6 people were murdered? And knowing that 6 people were murdered.
You're not just sleeping in the house where they were murdered. You're sleeping in the beds they were murdered in.
Exactly. You have some of their furniture, because they kept a lot of stuff. And one of the things they did say was they kept the beds. Yeah. Now, they didn't keep, I still don't believe they kept the mattresses. There's no way that
even be used again.
Back then, that was even a biohazard. So they had to get rid of that. But when they left everything they own. They didn't take a thing with them except for clothes and a trunk that I think belonged to George's grandmother.
I don't even think they took clothes. I think they took the clothes that were on their back. I don't think they took because someone was saying that there were still clothes hanging in the in the
closets. Yeah,
it was like they had gone to work for the day and would be coming back that evening.
Yeah, because when they went back into the house, when I think it was months later, someone approached the Lutzes and asked if they could have a seance there, if they could have psychic investigators come in.
And George had some of his biker buddies go stay at the house to pick up some things for them.
Yeah.
So when they initially left, they never went back.
He wouldn't even.
But they did send someone back to the house to obtain some things for them. So I think that probably that trunk and whatever clothes they took were retrieved. And those people that he sent to the house to get those things did not experience anything.
No. So, but it has been said that I think it was months later, Laura DeFeo brought in Ed and Lorraine Warren and a couple of other, I think it was Mary Pasquarelli and a couple of other psychic investigators. Plus they did, and it was a story for the news in that area. And they were going to spend the night in the house. And George said that he would meet them there to unlock the door. And he unlocked the door and said by the time he got from the front door back to his car, he was throwing up.
Right.
He was so sick just by back being on that property that it made him physically ill and refused to, he would not go in the house. Yeah.
And that professor, Dr. Holzer,
Heinz Holzer,
he was on there after the Lutzes left.
Mm-hmm.
I can't, for some reason, all of a sudden I can't speak. So he was there with a reporter, with
and a trans medium, yes,
and all of that. So he has some stuff to say about being on the property and stuff like that. So,
and they, things that there were, and there's one in particular, and I have to talk about this because a lot of people have said there's no way, but I've seen the photo. There is a photo that was taken when the Warrens were there.
Yeah.
Of they were going up the stairs and they were just snapping pictures. There's one photo in particular in the succession.
It's actually a camera that they had set up.
Yes, that was taking
pictures every so many seconds.
Yes. The picture before it, there's nothing in it. The picture after it, there's nothing in it. The picture, and I get goosebumps even thinking about it. There is a child standing in the doorway.
Right.
And it is a boy. You can tell it's a boy child.
And there's been comparisons made that
Yes.
this was the younger of the two
boys.
DeFeo
boys.
That were murdered
Yes.
in the house.
And I believe that was their room. I believe that was the room that they stayed in.
It is. I don't know
now,
that for sure, but
they have had this. They have given this photo. I believe Kodak did it. It was either Kodak or Polaroid. I can't remember who did it. They have given it to the experts. They cannot debunk this photo.
Right.
It was not messed with. It was not fabricated. Everybody that was there said there were no children in the home that night, and that there was no way they were going to let children come in the home that night.
Right.
So
and it's basically this little boy with glowing eyes.
Yes, looking out,
peeping out from that room,
like he's going to see who's coming up the stairs. Basically,
exactly.
Is what it looks like.
Exactly.
I'll tell you right now, the first time I ever saw the photo, the hairs on the back of my neck stood up. It freaked me out.
I mean, I truly do think that could be attributed to the fact that that's the DeFeo son's spirit.
Yes.
Not realizing that he's been murdered and interacting with the psychic presence that's in the house. Yeah. And there's more than one. You know, Lorraine Warren was psychic. The other lady,
Mary Pasquarelli, was
psychic.
She was a trans medium, so they could enter her body and talk to people through her.
So I think that was just, this was a way that he could make his presence known.
Right.
You know, not in any, and nothing happened to them while they were in the house. Like they weren't scratched, they weren't pushed, they weren't, none of that.
No.
I want to say that the psychics felt a presence.
One of the psychics did complain that she wasn't feeling well after the seance, after they did the seance.
Right.
And Lorraine Warren had made a comment when she was standing in the sewing room that was probably as close to hell as she ever wanted to get.
Right.
So she could feel the evil there. Mary Pasquarelli, I believe it was Mary Pasquarelli, said that she retreated to the bedroom that was Missy's bedroom, which was the younger of the DeFeo girls. Or no, Missy was the Lutz's daughter. She had retreated to Missy's room because it felt like a sanctuary to her, like something couldn't get in, and laid down because she wasn't feeling well. And she said that she felt like just a presence at the doorway and started reciting the Lord's Prayer. She said when she turned over, she saw figures, like shadowy figures, standing in the doorway, and they were saying the Lord's Prayer backwards. And she basically threw holy water out the door. And she said it made a sound like when you throw water on a hot pan or something, that sizzle sound that it makes, that it made that sound, and then they disappeared. So even to that point, it was still affecting people. But you have to understand what my point was about all that is these are people that believe in this. They're open to this. They can interact with this. So the fact that they felt stuff and nobody else did doesn't surprise me.
Right.
So, I mean, if you don't go looking for ghosts, you're not going to find ghosts. Plain and simple.
Very true.
So if you don't believe in it, then it's not going to affect you, and you're not going to have an issue with it. So that's my belief and my opinion. And you know, do I think something happened in the house? Yeah, I do. I think that there was so much chaos and turmoil, and that led up to the DeFeos being murdered.
Well, let's kind of go back to that, because let's talk about Butch DeFeo, which is Ronnie DeFeo Jr.
Yes.
Everybody called him Butch. He was heavily into drugs.
Oh, heavily. Yes.
All kinds of, I don't know what all else.
And his parents
definitely was doing heroin.
Fed his addiction.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
He had more than enough funds to.
Oh yeah. And didn't have to.
He was doing.
Was supposed to be working for him, but they never pressed the fact that he.
Right. So, and I've heard both sides of this. I have heard that Ronnie DeFeo Sr. was a very violent man.
Yes.
And I've heard from people that supposedly were there and were friends with their children that he never lifted a finger to any of them.
That he never heard them raise his voice. They never heard.
Even raised his voice. He was strict. He was firm.
Yeah.
But he was not violent.
Yeah.
But I've heard both. So I've heard that he was, and I've heard that he wasn't. So if you take into account that you've got someone that is heavily into drugs.
Yes.
And we're talking about, paranoia. We're talking about.
Oh, yeah, because of the stuff that he was on.
That he was doing.
Yeah.
Would
yeah.
Not to mention the fact that I have heard that he was not, 52 cards on deck.
Exactly.
You have the possibility of having someone who's not only on drugs, but possibly has some type of mental disorder.
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
I truly feel like he had a complete break.
Yes.
That night.
Yes.
I want to say, I lean towards he was schizophrenic.
More than likely.
I have no medical diagnosis. No. I have no, I don't have his medical records. I don't know this. This is my opinion. I believe he had a complete break that night. The drugs, the fact that he was possibly schizophrenic, all of that played into the fact he saw the shotgun, he went upstairs and took his whole family out.
Yeah.
Why they didn't hear the other shots, I couldn't tell you.
No.
There is no explanation for that.
No, there's no explanation for that at all.
Other than the only explanation I can think of is that they were somehow rendered that way.
Yeah.
That would cause them not to hear it or not to be able to get up or what have you.
Right.
I think that's possible, but I don't know that. But I do think something happened that would cause them not to be able to respond or get up.
Yeah. When
those other shots were ringing out. I do think that he obviously picked up shell casings. He was able to get rid of the weapon. He took that out of the home. I do think it's possible that he positioned them in the way they were found.
Yeah.
I do think it's possible that he was doing something, and this is not anything I've ever heard, but I do think it's possible that he was doing something and was about to be found out. Whether or not he was doing something to the girls and they were about to start telling on him.
Yeah.
I don't know this, but
that's been a theory, though.
That's just my opinion.
That's been a theory.
I think that's a possibility, but I think the bigger possibility is that he had some mental issues.
Yes.
And the fact that he was doing all these drugs caused some type of complete break in his psyche. And he just lost his mind and killed his entire family.
Yes.
And then came back to himself and
sobered up, so to speak.
Started kind of cleaning everything up.
Yeah.
Figuring out what story he was going to tell.
Yeah.
And at first, when this was first discovered, he was put into protective custody.
Yes, because they did not know.
Because they didn't know who had done it. There's also theories of that it was the government doing this, and
that it was a mob hit.
It was a mob hit.
Yeah.
I mean, there's so many rabbit holes you could run into.
Yeah.
With this story, it's insane. But Ronnie DeFeo Jr. was convicted.
Yes.
And sentenced to six life sentences, and he actually passed away this year.
Yes.
In March, in prison.
I believe he had cancer or something like that.
I don't know what it is, but he has always changed his story.
Always.
I don't think he has ever told the same story twice.
No.
He has, from the point of him going into custody, which was in 1974.
Yeah.
From that point forward, he has never told the same story.
No.
He has always told different stories. And when the saying is that when you're lying you never can remember the details you gave.
Right.
When you're telling the truth, you don't have to remember the details.
Exactly.
Because
Exactly.
you know them. So I don't think even he knows what happened that night, to be quite honest
Probably
with you.
not.
I don't think in his psyche, I don't think he knows what happened.
No.
I don't think he realizes what happened. I think he knows he did it.
Right.
But
the details are cloudy
the
to him.
details he
Yeah.
doesn't know.
The one thing that always struck me as interesting was that there was a one of the scenarios that he told. Now, mind you, a lot of the scenarios that he has told, Don has always been involved in it.
Right.
Okay. One of the scenarios that they believe happened was that Don, knowing his breakable state,
Yes,
and the state that he was in, started it. She was the one that gave him the gun, because he has claimed several times that a black cloaked figure, or a figure in all black cloaked, handed him the gun and told him it was time.
And it's known that Dawn DeFeo had a black hooded coat that
Yes.
she wore all the time.
Yes. Now, and I don't know how true this is, but I'm going to tell you right now, there is a story that the house was being watched, that DeFeo was being watched. Okay.
Right. Because of all the drugs and stuff.
And yes. And that somebody saw somebody leave the house,
right,
in a black hoodie, black clothes and everything. And that person returned later on.
Right.
And
that's what I've heard, was that person was Dawn.
Yes. And that's what they've said, that was Dawn that did that.
She went to this site where, and dropped the gun, which is where the gun was found, blah, blah, blah.
I've never heard any different. I've never heard that she was shot with anything different than the gun.
Right. I mean,
but there has been,
they were all shot with the same gun.
But there has been, there have been interviews where people have said that she was shot with a different caliber gun. Now I'll have to look into that and see what's going. If that's the truth, then there's a possibility she was involved with it. Right. I know that she was dating somebody and was in the process of possibly running off with the guy. She wanted to run off with the guy, and her dad was like against it, like no.
Well, and if we run down that rabbit hole, you think, okay, so she killed the parent. So her and Ronnie get together, they kill their parents. It's a whole Menendez brothers type deal.
Yeah.
Sorry, my dog was barking. So there's this whole story there. I have lost my train of thought. But why would she kill the kids? So let's run down that rabbit hole. If you think about it, obviously all of those kids were underage.
Yes.
And her and Ronnie were not.
No.
They were considered adults. She was 18. He was 19 or 20?
He was in his 20s, I believe.
So there's that they would be responsible for the other kids.
Yes.
If they didn't kill them too.
Yeah.
So, and she would not have wanted that responsibility.
Yeah.
She wanted to be out and free and on her, whatever, doing her own thing with this money from her parents dying. Wouldn't have wanted the responsibility of some younger children.
Yeah.
Because she's talking about 13, 12, and 9 were the ages of the other 3. Were the ages of the youngest 3. So they would still need someone to be their guardians and take care of them. So, that's a theory. It's definitely a theory for sure.
So it's one of those things where the more you read about it, the bigger the story gets.
Sure.
The fact of the matter is, 6 people lost their lives in that house that night by the hand of their own child.
Right.
And brother. That's devastatingly hard for a family to be in. And they had other family, but that's devastatingly hard for a family and a community to deal with. Then 13 months later, here comes this young family, moves into the house, and then they claim that all these things happened. Again, the community starts going through it all over again. The community of Amityville hates this book. They hate the story. They hate the movie. They wish it would go away.
And they've
Excuse
had
me.
people on their lawns. They've had, I mean, can you imagine, like, every time something happens about this house, they've got to relive
Yes.
all of this.
And they've said
over again.
every time a new movie comes out or something comes out about it, a documentary, it happens all over again.
Right.
So this community is reeling through all this. You have it half and half. There are half of people that believe in it in the community, and there are half of people that think the Lutzes were just out to make money, which I will again reiterate. The Lutzes did not make very much money off of this. They were basically the ones that made the least amount of money off of this.
I think they made like somewhere between $200,000 and $300,000.
If that much.
I want
Yeah.
to say that's the
Ballpark. But
price range they were in as far as like what they made on the.
yeah.
But you also have to think. I mean, that seems like a lot of money, especially back in the 70s.
Yes.
But this movie alone made millions
Yes.
of dollars.
Yes.
It made tens of millions of dollars, I believe.
And the franchise still makes money. Because
sure.
it wasn't even 5 years ago, they made a remake of the original Amityville Horror.
Right.
That was a box office hit that people loved.
Ryan Reynolds was in it.
Ryan Reynolds was in it, and it was. I've seen the movie. Was a good movie.
Grace
Yeah.
Lawrence was in it.
But it was a really good movie. Now,
I actually like that movie.
Yeah, and I've seen the original as well. I actually own the original. I mean, for the kids growing up, listen, I watched the interview with Danny Lutz that he did about, I think, 3 or 4 years ago. Like I said, this kid had every reason to come out and say they were full of it. My parents were just trying to get money and all this. I mean, he even resented his mother a little bit for the things that went on. But this kid tells you the story that, the things that they said were true. And this is a nightmare that we still, his brother and sister won't even talk about it. That's how much this affected these kids. To me, yeah, things happened in the house. I believe that his stepdad opened them up to things that were probably not good, to the point where they were evil. Like Jenny said earlier, you cannot live somewhere where somebody died and not have something that is a stain on that house. Some mark is left on that house. Especially just the sheer terror of it to begin with. Even if it wasn't true, your mind and your body is still going to react to the fact that you are living somewhere where people were murdered, period.
They didn't choose for this to happen to them.
No.
But it did happen.
It happened to happen. So whether you believe it or not, I mean, the Lutz family went through an ordeal, and, sadly enough, it took a toll, especially on Kathy.
Mm-hmm. My thought on as far as the Lutz go is, I believe they believe something happened.
Yes.
And the easiest explanation is to tie it to what happened previously in that home.
Yes.
Easy.
Oh, yeah.
A lot of people were murdered in that house.
Yeah.
Violent murders. So yeah, it would be very easy to tie something into, what they were feeling and experiencing into what actually happened in the house. I don't think there's a connection.
No.
Between the murders and what happened to the Lutzes.
No.
I think what happened to the Lutzes was brought on by a Lutz.
Yes. By things that were part of his, not necessarily theirs, but part of his lifestyle that he brought Kathy into when they married. And even he's made that comment before.
They carried it with them to the next place.
Right.
It didn't stop when they left.
Because they had problems.
The DeFeo house.
They had problems when they fled to her mother's in California.
Right.
Which was on the opposite side of the country. Right. So it's still, and even the Warrens said that these people fled the house, but the house didn't flee them, because whatever happened followed them where they went. And they had problems for years after that. Even Danny Lutz has said that they had problems for years after that. So, weigh in on your opinion, what you think. You've seen all the hype around it. I don't think there's anybody that doesn't know the story.
Let's have a discussion about it. That would be interesting.
I would love to see what other people think.
Are. on everything that we touched on today, which
Yeah.
obviously was a lot. So yeah, weigh in. Let's have some discussion either on Facebook or go over to our YouTube channel, and we can have discussion there on this video that I will post up. It will probably be posted up pretty quickly after I post up on the Facebook page. So let us know what your thoughts, what your opinions are. Don't forget to go over to our YouTube channel and subscribe there. Like, share, all of that good stuff. Email us. Let us know if there's something you would like to hear us talk about. We want to start getting some more interaction with you guys. I mean, the whole point of this, one of the points, obviously, we think we're very entertaining.
Yes.
But that was not the whole point of us doing this podcast.
No.
We want to interact. We want to hear what you guys think. We want to have meaningful discussion about what we're talking about. So we really want more engagement from you guys. So let us know what we need to do for you guys to be more engaged. Subscribe, share, comment, all that stuff. Either Facebook, YouTube, Anchor, Spotify, any of that stuff. Just
hit us
reach
up.
out to us.
Absolutely.
Let us know what you're thinking and what you want to talk about, and we will definitely be open to doing that.
Oh, so, yeah. If there's anything that in particular that, some of you we have a lot of listeners that are from overseas. We have about a handful from overseas. If there's something in your area that you would like for us to kind of research and see what's going on, let us know. I mean, we're open to everything.
For sure.
We are murder mystery junkies. I mean, both of us watch anything to have to do with that. So, if there's something in your area that you'd like for us to research that you want to know more about or that you know about, hit us up. Tell us what it is. We gladly accept it from anywhere. So doesn't matter where you're at. So
thanks for tuning in today, and we appreciate you guys, and we hope to hear from you soon.
Yes.
And we will be back soon with another episode.
Absolutely.
Bye, y'all.
Bye, guys.
Well, that's all we have for today.
Drop by our Facebook page and let us know what keeps you up at night. Bye, y'all.